And today I want to do something different. I don't just want to give generic business advice. I want to show you four examples of hidden profit leaks that I found inside of home service businesses and how those profit leaks were draining out cash every single month from these businesses. So I'm going to walk you through some profit leak examples and I'll show you how to find those issues, how to spot them in your own business. Because it's one thing to share theory, it's another to actually go look in your own business. And then I'll give you some action steps. And then at the end, we'll open it up for some live questions. Okay, let's take off with our first profit leak. Number one is underpriced service calls. And unfortunately, I see this way too often. When companies don't understand their numbers, they tend to price their jobs just based on what their competitors charge or what they think is the going rate out in the market. So let me just share a little story with you. Recently, I was working with a gutter company down in southern Idaho, and they were newer. They've been in business for a while, but a little bit newer. And so they were basing their price on what their competitors charged. They didn't really understand their numbers as far as how much those materials actually cost and what it was costing them for if they used their own employees versus if they used a subcontractor, because they were doing a combination of both. And when we got into their profit and loss statement, there was a lot of confusion over what belonged up in the cost of goods sold section of the P&L and what belonged down in the overhead section of their P&L. So we went through some discussion and went through moving around some things within their chart of accounts and recoding some of their expenses so they could get a better feel for what is their gross profit margin. What was their cost of goods sold percentage? When we first started working together, they had no idea what that number was. And so it was a big win for them once we did that rearranging and we were able now to start tracking their cost of goods sold percent and their gross profit percent by month as we worked together. And over during that time period, as we were fixing these jobs, we realized that a certain type of job that they were making minimal profit on it, just maybe 5 or 10% was all. And another type of job, they had a nice, big, healthy profit margin. And so at that point, then we entered the discussion of how do we strategically get more of those higher profit margin jobs and start moving away from the lower profit margin type jobs. So this was a light bulb moment for him. Up to that time, he had just been focused on selling more. Just sell more. It didn't matter what it was, sell more. So once we had run some jobs through some templates and trackers that I use, we did come back and we raised prices on both types of jobs, not just the lower end one. We also raised them on that higher margin job so that he could start getting a better margin overall until he was able to phase out that lower end type of job where they just weren't making much money. So it resulted in an 8% price increase, and that was enough to get them about $50,000 in additional bottom line profits over the course of a year. They were thrilled with that because that was $50,000. They did not have to go sell more to bring in that cash. So, in their example, their labor costs had increased over the last couple of years. Their fuel had increased dramatically over the last couple of years. Their costs of insurance had increased. Payroll taxes had increased because labor had increased, but their pricing basically hadn't changed. So we needed to fix that. This was a very busy but not profitable company who later then became profitable. And so this is what I like to see when we can get these turned around and help the home service business owner become profitable and learn to understand and embrace their numbers so that they can become more profitable. So in this particular instance, we determined that more revenue did not fix a pricing problem. And this particular client was really sold on the idea that if I just sell more, because that's what his previous coach had told him, if I just sell more, I just need to sell more. And in his case, the more he sold, the worse it got because the margins were too thin. So, if your margins are weak or they're thin, selling more just creates more stress and chaos, but it doesn't result in more profit. So, watch for these warning signs. If your revenue is growing, but your bank account is shrinking, that is a good sign to be watching for. Or if you have constant cash flow pressure, is there stress around making payroll or paying a vendor? Or an owner who's not able to pay themselves consistently? You're kind of hit and miss. You're able to pay yourself sometimes, but not always. Or gross profit margins that are inconsistent. You're up and down and all around. Those are areas we need to be watching for so that we can fix these profit leaks. So, I'd like you to take a look at 10 of your services or jobs that you've done recently and sit down and look at the numbers. Figure out, what did that payroll cost you? What did your overhead add to the cost of the job? What about your materials? Do you have accurate pricing? And then compare these costs to where they were a couple of years ago. And then decide, do we need to do a price increase? Most everybody needs to increase at least some, just due to the costs, all the rising costs that we've incurred. Number two profit leak is going to be labor efficiency and those darned callbacks. They sneak in on us all the time. I see home service business owners losing money due to excess windshield time because they're driving back and forth across town or the county, depending on where you're located. And that generally is due to poor dispatching. So we're not organized enough to be able to maximize our routes. And then those dreaded callbacks. The job wasn't done correctly the first time. So we need to get in and fix those jobs, get them to be the quality that they need to be, and that may require some additional training with your team. And it may require the implementation of additional systems so that your techs have a system to follow so you get the same result every single time. So let me give you an example there. I had a painting company in Texas that I was working with. They didn't have a real CRM, so their scheduling was done on a whiteboard on the wall in their office. And different times he found that he had painters that were overscheduled. They couldn't get the jobs done fast enough to get to their next call. But then other times he had painters that were underscheduled. And now they had time sitting in between jobs where they were hanging out somewhere, whether it was out in the field or back in the shop. And that caused jobs to get stacked up on top of each other. And other times we had just kind of big holes in their day. And so then we had unproductive painters. Because some of the jobs kept getting stacked up and the pressure was being felt by the guys, he ended up with a string of jobs that had to be redone due to poor quality. And it was just that they were rushing. They weren't taking the time to do the job that they normally did. And this caused a kind of a ripple effect of things. First of all, he had to paint a second or third time and fix the problem. But then it caused unnecessary labor. He had to send somebody back out to do the job that wasn't done right the first time. So now not only did it cost him the first time, but it cost him the second time. And then they caught the cost of the lost job that they couldn't do the new job because they were back fixing the previous job. So when we were looking at the costs on those jobs, he lost money on each one of those jobs. And so we had to fix that problem. And part of fixing that problem was to create a system around the scheduling and their quality control. They didn't have a real clear definition of what the company standards were and the expectations, so their crew could actually do that better job. The owner knew what he wanted, but like a lot of owners, it was up here in his head, but he hadn't clearly defined it for his crew. So we helped him develop a detailed checklist for the crew to be used on every single painting job that they went on. And we also had him develop a spec sheet for his crew to follow for every single job. Because part of the problem was the owner was the person out there talking to the different customers or the different prospects. And the owner had a lot of information up in his head, but it wasn't getting put down into some sort of a form, whether it was a paper form or an electronic form, whatever it needed to be. It wasn't being put into a format that the crew could see what he had talked to that property owner on. And so things were getting missed in translation. Well, and because things were getting missed in translation, oftentimes while they were out at a property owner would ask them, "Can you just do that proverbial one more thing?" And so the crew, being nice, would go ahead and do it, not knowing what the owner had discussed with that property owner, or the painting company owner with the property owner. And we had to fix that. We had to fix that communication and disconnect problem. So once we got some templates and checklists in place and some systems around that so that the crew had something to follow for every single job, they were able to add, it was right about $25,000 to their bottom line net profit. And for them, that was huge. They were about $1 million company at the time. So that was huge just to add $25,000 each year just because we now had checklists and systems in place that we didn't have before. So I was very happy with the outcome of that particular one because it was a fairly easy leak to fix. And I always tell my clients I'm working with them that the most expensive labor hour is the one that you have to pay for twice or heaven forbid 3 times. Those are terribly expensive hours. So here's some warning signs to watch for. We want to watch for your technicians or your painters in this case running behind constantly, never seeming to get caught up. A high overtime number. Are the guys constantly booking overtime? Are we controlling those hours, controlling those costs? And repeat service calls. They're having to keep going back and fixing something because it didn't get done right or to the owner, to the property owner, the homeowner satisfaction. And also gross profit varying between different techs, or in this case, it was painters. How quickly was the job getting done? What kind of quality work was being done? How thorough were they? And if we can get that dialed in, your gross profit margin should be similar from job to job to job. So those were the areas that we needed to fix with him. So here's some things for you. Is I'd recommend that you track your callbacks by technician, installer, painter, whatever your word is for your production type person in your business. And then measure your billable versus non-billable hours. Do we have a lot of non-billable hours because they're standing around in the mornings drinking coffee and eating donuts before they head out? Look for those types of things. Those are profit leaks. And then looking at your daily van or truck, your route planning, do we have them making a straight line and not crisscrossing back and forth and having that unnecessary windshield time? And then also, we recommend creating some repeatable processes for each of the services that you offer. So they can be done the same by Tom or by George or by Fred. Doesn't matter who goes out and does the job, it gets done basically the same way. So that's some quick wins for that particular profit leak. And now we are headed on to profit leak number 3. This particular profit leak is one I see on a very regular basis when I dig into a client's QuickBooks file and we go line by line by line down through their profit and loss or their P&L report. And it's one that always causes an owner to go, "I didn't know. How come I didn't know that?" So this particular profit leak is centered around small expenses that seem to multiply everywhere. We always talk about, something multiplying like rabbits. Well, these little expenses tend to do the same thing. So a lot of times I find these hidden overhead leaks in software subscriptions and unused memberships. I find them in fuel waste. Oh, that's a big one sometimes. In inventory shrinkage or poor purchasing systems. These are places that I go looking for as we're looking for these small expenses that seem to be leak out everywhere. And this particular client, there was no one expense that looked huge, but combined, they created tens of thousands of dollars in leakage. And this particular client was a roofing company in South Carolina. He didn't have a very good set of books, and it seemed like his bookkeeper was always months behind. So we never had good solid numbers to work with, at least not up front. So the owner ended up making decisions by just kind of winging it. He'd take a look at his bank account on his phone and make his decision. And this was before I got Profit First set up in his business. If he saw something that looked interesting, he just bought it. You know, you've all heard of shiny object syndrome. He bought it. He had many different software subscriptions that weren't being used because he was constantly looking for that one thing that was going to be better, constantly looking for that one piece of software that was going to answer the problem that he had. So he had a lot of like silos with different pieces of subscriptions there. And he had also purchased memberships to several different programs, but he'd get partway into them and say, "No, this isn't what I was looking for," or "No, this isn't going to work," or whatever it was. And so we had a lot of money sitting out there in this type of thing. The Each of these programs that he had purchased, these memberships into these programs that he purchased, were mainly theory type teaching. There was minimal, if any, implementation. So it would show up, listen to this video, and off you went. Or show up for this group discussion and off you went, type of thing. And so he didn't really do much of anything with them because he was busy. Yeah, he might show up for some of the meetings, but he was a busy guy. You know, had a small team trying to do it all, a lot of it himself. So at some point in this relationship, I had a meeting with his bookkeeper, and we were able to figure out what was the holdup on getting his books done timely each month. They get that fixed. And then I helped his bookkeeper with some coding and just some things that were causing some bottlenecks for him that the roofing owner wasn't able to help him with. So we got that figured out. And then that allowed his books to be done timely and, more importantly, accurately. During this time period, the owner and I had a few meetings where we went line by line by line all the way down through his P&L report. And opened up and looked at every expense where he was spending money. As we were doing this, we identified them as a need or a want. And that was our first coding. We ended up with another set of coding to filter it down even more after that. But just initially, was this a need or a want? Is it something you need to keep your business running forward, or something that you want because you think, hey, this would be a great idea? So once we got down with all of these numbers that we worked our way through, we realized that there was about $32,000 that could be added back to his bottom line just by canceling some subscriptions and memberships that weren't being used. And that was a lot of money for him. And that was a major win that we were able to put that much money back in his bottom line profits. So profit leaks rarely show up as one big giant mistake. They're never going to show up on your P&L with a line that says profit leaks here. You know, that's you're never going to see it that way. And they usually drip out slowly through dozens of small decisions. Here are some warning signs, things that you can be watching for. Lots of small automatic withdrawals. Many of these programs are famous for being $99 a month or $97 a month or $49 a month, whatever. But over time, they really do add up. Also, pay close attention to the inventory. I know a lot of you don't keep a lot of inventory on hand, some of you keep more. Really monitor that inventory carefully because inventory can disappear easily. Also, look at the actual ordering of materials for your various jobs. Are we ordering the right amount of materials up front and not ordering extra? I do see, unfortunately, I see employee theft from time to time where the person doing the ordering was also working on a project at home. And so they ordered a little extra here and a little extra there, and they were able to fund their project at home. I hate to even bring that one up, but unfortunately, it is out there. Also, Another warning sign is that there's no accountability in your system anywhere. Nobody's is actually responsible or has ownership of a particular area in your business. So, things that we need to be watching for. So, what I'd like to suggest that you do is do a subscription audit every 90 days. So, every quarter, go in and look at all the subscriptions and the things that you're paying for on a regularly recurring basis. Are they needs or are they wants? Take a look down through your vendors. Are you getting better pricing from vendor A than you do from vendor B? Take some spot checks on your inventory. Walk out there and see, what do you currently have on hand? What do you think you're supposed to have on hand? Do the numbers match up? And have some accountability over fuel cards. All too often, I see employees not only filling up the company van or the company truck, but also personal vehicles on that fuel card. So make sure there's some accountability around that. We look at how many miles were driven in a certain period of time and how much fuel was purchased. Those things can really add up over time. These appear to be small leaks, but when you pull them together, they can turn into some big profit leaks in a business. Okay, we're moving right along to leak number 4. This one is all around, are you servicing the right customer? Ooh, that's a good one, isn't it? Some customers will drain your time. They call you back over and over and over and over, and sometimes it's for just silly little piddly little things. Other times it's legitimate. Sometimes they're lonely and they just want somebody to talk to. We all have seen that particular customer. There's also customers who constantly complain. No matter what you do, you will never ever make them satisfied. So, how can we steer away from those types of customers? And then there's the whole group that demands some sort of discounts. Discounts that you're not willing to give, because if you give a discount that's that much off your bottom line profit for that job, which then reflects all the way down to the bottom line profit for your company. And then there's those customers that create scheduling chaos. They're either not home when you show up, and now that wrecks your schedule, or things keep happening and they keep rescheduling, which can also wreck your schedule. So be paying attention to those kinds of customers. And then there's the other kind of customers who never refer. What I'm going to use is quality business. They may give you referrals, but it's more people just like themselves. So we want to really be paying attention to these kinds of customers. Meanwhile, your best customers, they pay on time. You can trust their recommendations. They're giving you good referrals. They refer others on a regular basis. They value the service that you provide for them. So, my point in this particular profit leak about bad customers is not every dollar is a good dollar. I remember years ago, I had a tax client who was a fairly simple tax return, but they took up more of my time than my big, complicated tax return clients did. Because this particular taxpayer could never understand why their refund wasn't as big as this or as big as one of their friends or something along those lines, whatever it was. It was just ridiculous. And I finally had to tell them they needed to go to someplace else. I just could not take the time they needed for what they were willing to pay. To give them the service they wanted, I would have had to probably triple or quadruple the price of their tax return because they felt that they were entitled to that kind of service. So some customers create hidden operational costs. And I wanted to talk to you about a solar company that I've worked with in the last couple of years who was trying to sell to just anybody who was remotely interested at all. So they really hadn't drilled down into their avatar. They spent a ton of money on advertising because they weren't sure which advertising avenues were working. So let's try this one, and then let's try that one, and let's throw some money over here, and let's try this, and let's try that. They were trying everything. And consequently, they were getting some leads, but they were spending a ton of money on advertising and a lot of staff hours trying to manage all this. And they were really having trouble with their financing program, trying to get these customers to qualify for the financing because solar can be a big project when it comes in. The pressure was slowly killing them. It was really getting bad. Their salespeople were selling jobs that they couldn't get financing for because the customer didn't really qualify. And that created a huge impact on their team. Their salespeople weren't happy because they weren't earning the commissions that they thought they were going to get. And their in house team wasn't happy because the stress was so high as they were trying to get these people qualified. So it just became this endless cycle over and over and over again. And it made for a kind of an unhappy work environment for everybody. So, over a few months, we dug into their customer base and we were able to determine the type of customer who could either afford to pay for the job up front or had a strong enough financial backing behind them that they would qualify easily for their financing program. And once the salespeople narrowed their focus down to just these homeowners or property owners that fit these new requirements, their actual sales began to increase. And the number of customers being turned down for financing dramatically decreased. So, over a few months, their profits started to increase as the team had to relearn how to work together and then how to provide a better level of customer service to those customers who were a better fit for the company to work with. This change resulted in about $72,000 that year in increased profits. Now, it didn't happen overnight. None of these changes happen overnight. Please don't think that. This is a longer term play. It can take months or a year to get these results because you have to be willing to make the changes and measure and make some more changes and measure. So, over these four examples, this is a total of $179,000 added to bottom line profits by fixing these profit leaks, these leaks that were just quietly draining away. So, here's some signs of things to watch for. When your team is dreading certain types of customers or even certain customers, that cringe factor, scope creep on a job. That's a big one because scope creep can eat up your profits so fast. Constant price objections. So if you're hitting customers where there's constant price objections, you may not be talking to the right kinds of people. Or slow collections on the other side. That's another group of customers we don't want to be working with. So I'd like you to identify your top 10 best customers and then identify your bottom 10 most draining customers. And then let's go back and find out what does the top 10 have in common? What does that bottom 10 have in common? And then let's improve our system for attracting those best top 10 type customers. How do we get more of them? Where do we find them? Where do they hang out? What do they like to do? Do they attend certain functions or do they belong to certain clubs or whatever? How can we find more just like them? So, the good news with all these profit leaks are that most profit leaks can be fixed once you know where to look. And the businesses that improve their profitability the quickest usually aren't the ones that are working harder. They're the ones who become more intentional with learning their numbers. So that was just four different examples, four different companies with about $179,000 added back to bottom line profits. So now I want to just take a couple minutes for some Q&A. We had some questions that were sent in ahead of time, so I'm going to start with those. Uh, One of my first questions was a frustrating item in somebody's business says that it's very hard to sustain growth and staying in the black because competition is so fierce. So my answer back to this particular prospect or customer is what are you doing to show yourself as different from your competitors? If all your competitors are serving vanilla ice cream and you come in with peach mango ice cream, you're going to draw some attention because it's something different. And Be thinking of ways that you can be different than everybody else in your local area. What can you do differently? How can you show up differently? What kind of customer service can you give that makes it different? How can your follow up techniques be different or better? How can you build out a customer relationship? So stop and take some time and think through these things. What can I do differently? I always recommend you look outside your industry for some great examples of things we can do differently. What kind of extra value can you show so that your customers look at you and go, yeah, that's the obvious choice for my problem? Okay, let me pick another one here that's come in ahead of time. This particular business feels like money is slipping through the cracks everywhere. What can we do about it? Do you have any ideas, Diane? Well, I do have some ideas. Four of those ideas we just talked about, and other ideas are monitoring your numbers very carefully, watching for changes in the numbers. There's so many different places that profit can leak out of your business. But if you're on the numbers, we can monitor them and we can drill down and find those profit leaks in your business. So hopefully that helped a little bit with that question. I've got time to take one more question here. Let's see what I can come up with. Oh, here's one. This particular home service business owner feels like they are do not have control of their business, and they're wondering what could they do to feel like they have more control. They're just in firefighting mode. So in this particular area, the thing I would recommend would be start implementing systems. Start documenting the systems in your business. Build a system around every service that you offer, a checklist, a template, whatever it needs to be, so that every time one of your team members takes a call, goes out to do a job, whatever it is, it's done the same way consistently every single time, giving you a kind of a nice, even quality control. So you as the owner are not out there constantly fixing fires, which creates that out of control feel because you just spend all your time as a firefighter putting out fires. So build systems around everything. They can be as simple as a written down system. They can be recorded on some sort of a video recorder, a Loom video or something like that. They can be an audio where you just speak into a recorder, but build systems around everything that you do. Document everything that your guys do, that you do within your own office. Document these things. Get systems built around it. And as you have more systems, you will start to feel that control because people will know what's expected of them. They'll know how you want it done. You want it done in this particular order. We use this vendor, and this is how we do things in this company. That will give you control fairly quickly. All right. That's been a great call today. It doesn't look like I have any others in the chat. So I'm going to just move on to the next section. If today's call has made you realize that you may have some hidden profit leaks in your business, then you might want to reach out because that is exactly why I do profit impact calls. On my profit impact calls, we will drill down into your numbers and I will show you where cash is leaking out of your business. And oftentimes we find at least 100, 150,000. Sometimes it's only 50. But we will find where cash is leaking out of your business and give you some ideas of where you can go to plug it. These calls are no obligation. And we will put the link to the profit impact calls in the notes to this call so that you'll have it for you. Most owners are shocked by what we uncover. Have a great rest of your day.